Humans didn't start eating other humans because they were simply starving. At least, that's not what the evidence always shows. Archaeologists have discovered human bones covered in the same cut marks, fractures, and processing patterns normally found on butchered animals. But here's the disturbing part. Those marks don't automatically tell us why it happened. That's the real mystery, because prehistoric cannibalism wasn't one event, one culture, or one reason. Sometimes it may have been survival, sometimes violence, and in one extraordinary case, it may have been part of a funeral ritual. The deeper archaeologists dig, the stranger our ancestors become. Let's start nearly 800,000 years ago. Inside Gran Dolina Cave in northern Spain, researchers uncovered the remains of several early humans mixed with animal bones and stone tools. The human bones weren't simply buried. They had been cut apart and broken in ways remarkably similar to the nearby animal remains. The evidence suggested that these bodies had been butchered and consumed. Think about that. Cannibalism isn't a dark chapter that suddenly appeared in recent history. It reaches deep into the story of our human relatives. Long before cities, farming, or even modern humans existed, another human population may already have been eating its own kind. But here's the problem. Finding cut marks is not the same as finding motive. A bone can be damaged by predators, weather, collapsing rock, or thousands of years underground. Archaeologists therefore look for patterns. Stone tool cuts where muscles were attached, fresh fractures that could expose marrow, human tooth marks, and, importantly, whether human remains were processed in ways comparable to animal remains from the same site. When those clues appear together, the possibility becomes much harder to ignore. So was it hunger? Sometimes, probably. Imagine surviving an Ice Age winter. Food disappears. Large animals migrate. A failed hunt could mean days without eating. Under those conditions, a dead body could become calories, fat, and marrow. But that explanation doesn't fit every case. Consider Gough's cave in England. Around 14,700 years ago, people used this cave in what is now Somerset. Archaeologists found human remains showing unmistakable signs of butchery. Flesh had been removed. Long bones had been broken open for marrow. Human teeth had also left marks. At first, it sounds like survival, until researchers noticed the skulls. They hadn't simply been smashed. Some had been carefully modified into skull cups. Think about the work involved. The face had to be removed. The edges had to be shaped. The skull had to be prepared into a usable vessel. If the only goal was food, that extra work makes little sense. And then there was something even stranger. One human forearm bone from the cave had been engraved with a deliberate zigzag design. Researchers reconstructed a sequence in which the bone was defleshed and chewed, engraved, and later broken to obtain marrow. Suddenly, this doesn't look like a simple meal. It looks like behavior with rules. And that changes the question. Maybe prehistoric cannibalism wasn't always about eating people. Maybe it was about what eating meant. We use one word, cannibalism, but that word can hide completely different behaviors. One group might consume an enemy after conflict. Another might eat during famine. Another might consume a dead relative as part of a funerary tradition. From our perspective, all three become the same disturbing word. To the people performing them, they could have meant completely different things. The frustrating truth is that beliefs don't fossilize. Bones survive. Ideas don't. Archaeologists can reconstruct how a body was cut, broken, and processed. They can sometimes determine whether the remains were fresh when they were damaged, but they cannot recover the prayers spoken over the body. They cannot hear the stories told around the fire. They cannot ask the people what they believed they were doing. The physical evidence survives. The meaning usually disappears. There's another layer. We often imagine prehistoric humans as one enormous culture, as if everyone followed the same rules. They didn't. Different populations had different traditions for dealing with the dead. Some buried bodies. Some cremated them. Some left remains exposed. And archaeological evidence shows that cannibalism could exist alongside other forms of mortuary treatment. That means there was never one universal prehistoric rule for what to do with a dead person. Human cultures were already diverse. Now make the story even more uncomfortable. Neanderthals show evidence of cannibalism too. At Goyet Cave in Belgium, researchers found Neanderthal remains dating to more than 40,000 years ago, with evidence of butchery. Some of the bones were later used as tools for working stone. The human body had become food. Then it became material. That sounds horrifying to us, but judging the behavior only through modern expectations can hide the bigger question. Ancient people weren't trying to become villains in history books. They were responding to environments, beliefs, conflicts, and survival pressures that we can barely reconstruct. To some groups, consuming a person might have been practical. To another, it might have been an act against an enemy. To another, it might have been part of how the community handled death. The physical action could look similar. The meaning could be completely different. And that's why scientists have to be careful. The bones can tell us what happened to them. They are much worse at telling us why. A cut mark proves contact with a tool. It doesn't prove hunger. A broken bone may show marrow extraction. It doesn't prove the person was desperate. A skull cup shows deliberate modification. It doesn't give us the words spoken during the ritual. Archaeology can reconstruct behavior far better than belief. So when someone asks, why did humans start eating themselves? The most honest answer is that there probably wasn't a single beginning. There was no one tribe that invented it, no single discovery, no universal reason. Different human groups could arrive at similar behavior under completely different circumstances. And that may be much stranger than a simple origin story, because the really disturbing part isn't just that humans sometimes ate humans. It's that humans could decide what another human body meant: food, enemy, relative, ritual object, memory. The same species could look at a dead human body and see completely different realities. And that tells us something important about being human. We don't just survive. We create meaning around survival. We don't just die. The people left behind decide what death means. That may be why Gough's cave is so fascinating. The evidence suggests that some people there did not simply consume bodies and move on. They processed remains, shaped skulls, and engraved bone. Whatever their beliefs were, their actions followed some kind of system. We may never know exactly what that system meant, and good archaeology is comfortable saying that, because science isn't about inventing satisfying endings. It's about following evidence as far as it goes, then admitting where the trail disappears. So why did humans start eating themselves? The answer is probably not one answer. Sometimes it may have been survival, sometimes conflict, sometimes ritual, and sometimes the evidence simply isn't strong enough to know. The bones tell us what happened. They rarely tell us why. Maybe that's why this subject feels so disturbing. It's not because our ancestors were monsters. It's because they were people. People facing hunger, grief, fear, conflict, and death. People trying to make sense of bodies after life had ended. People living in worlds where the rules were different, but the basic human problems were strangely familiar. And when we look at those ancient cut marks, we're not just seeing evidence of cannibalism. We're seeing evidence that humans have always tried to give meaning to the things they couldn't control, even death, even hunger, even each other. And that is deeply human.